Nestle is the largest food company in the world. Their products are part of most of people's lives, from iconic sweets like Kit Kat or Smarties to frozen foods or pet food. The list of brands that Nestle owns is endless. But behind this colorful product palette is something the company would rather keep hidden. But as the years went by, critics just got louder and louder as reports of killing babies, child labor, and exploitation were made public. But this is not all. To really understand how Nestle got this way, we have to look deeper. This is the dark side of Nestle. To understand the story of Nestle, we need to go back in time to the 1960s and take a look at how Nestle started off. Nestle was founded in 1867 by a guy named Henry Nestle. In the mid-1800s, infant mortality was extremely high, especially among babies that couldn't be breastfed by their mother. These mothers would often lose their babies due to malnutrition. Henry was aware of this problem, and after some time he came up with a solution. He developed a milk-based baby food that was a carefully formulated mixture of cow's milk, wheat flour, and sugar. The product was first tested on a baby who could not tolerate his mother's milk or alternative products at this time. Henry's formula saved the baby's life. After this success, the new baby formula soon proved to be a viable option for mothers who were unable to breastfeed their babies, and the product was soon sold in large parts of Europe and the US. But in 1875, Henry retired and sold his company, but the name Nestle remained. The actual birth of the Nestle we know today was in 1905, when Nestle and another big rival company at the time, the Anglo-Swiss Milk Company, merged together. From this point on, the new founded company started to acquire company after company and grew faster and faster. In World War II, even the US military became one of Nestle's biggest customers. Because Nestle's coffee, Nescafé, was valuable to keep soldiers awake and was easy to transport, didn't spill, and could be quickly prepared for the soldiers in the field. In the years after the war, even more companies were acquired, leading to an even bigger global standing of the company. By now, Nestle offered a big variety of products such as coffee, baby food, dairy products, chocolate, bottled water, or canned soups, just to name a few. But all the success and money that Nestle had made was not enough for them, and by the 1970s, the first controversies were creeping in. Until this point, the baby formula that Henry Nestle had created was only being sold as an alternative to natural breast milk for those mothers who needed it because they couldn't breastfeed their babies. But this was not enough for Nestle, as they wanted to sell the formula to all mothers, not just those who needed it. So they started an aggressive marketing campaign that tried to convince mothers into thinking that their baby formula was healthier than breastfeeding. But breast milk is the best nutrition for babies, and the World Health Organization recommends that infants should be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of their lives. But through Nestle's aggressive marketing, many mothers believed them. They used radio advertising and posters, but also hired saleswomen to dress up as nurses to suggest the false claim that their formula was healthier than the breast milk. They even came to the homes of the mothers and tried to sell them Nestle's baby formula. Free samples of the formula were also included in hospitals and maternity units, and the mothers were given just enough samples that they would reduce their ability to produce breast milk and were dependent on Nestle's baby formula. But especially in less developed countries, a lot of families couldn't even afford Nestle's formula because it was too expensive. And that was not the only problem in these regions. In areas lacking clean water, mixing formula with contaminated water led to malnutrition and increased infant mortality. What adds up to this is that the instructions on the product were mostly in English, which most mothers couldn't read, which led to some diluting the formula so it would last longer, which decreased its nutritional value. All of this led to babies getting ill, and an estimated millions of babies died because of this. In 1974, the Prospect, the baby killer, informed about Nestle's practice, which led to a boycott against Nestle in 1977, and the introduction of new regulations by the World Health Organization to regulate how baby formula could be promoted and that it could not be portrayed as better than breast milk. Nestle publicly agreed and started to try to clean their image with a campaign for breastfeeding that they still did many years after, called the Super Babies. But behind the scenes, they didn't really change. as they were found repeating the same practice again, for example in Pakistan, where Nestle allegedly encouraged doctors to push its baby formula over breastfeeding. But this controversy shouldn't stay the last one. In the 2000s, reports documented the use of child labor, slavery and child trafficking on cocoa plantations in West Africa, which supply major chocolate companies including Nestle. Children working on these farms are as young as 8 years old and have to carry heavy loads, spray pesticides and work long working hours without pay or proper protection. Nestle responded and said that they condemn all forms of child labor and are working to remove all forms of this from the supply chain. But over 2 decades later, by 2020, only 51% of Nestle's cocoa was traceable and was sourced in a more responsible way. So even though Nestle had already promised to make their chocolate slave-free by 2005, not enough has happened until now. But to be fair, Nestle states that in 2024, almost 90% of cocoa was sourced through the Nestle cocoa plant, what suggests they have improved a lot until now. But still, the scandals don't stop here. In 2005, the Nestle CEO implied that water was not a human right.
Die eine Anschauung extrem, würde ich sagen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt, als Mensch sollten Sie einfach Recht haben, Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung.
He later backtracked due to media critics.
I've always supported the human right to water.
But Nestle's actions show how they really felt about this. In developing countries where water was needed the most, Nestle pumped loads and loads of groundwater. For example, in Pakistan, Nestle set up a bottling plant and began to draw really large amounts of groundwater, which they brought away from the villagers, bottled it, and sold back to the same people they had taken the water from. But of course, at a much higher price. Locals claimed that wells dried up, water quality dropped, and they didn't have the money to buy the expensive water that was being sold back to them, which meant they were forced to drink water from contaminated sources, which often were toxic. Between the years 2013 and 2017, Nestle extracted an estimated amount of 4.4 billion liters of groundwater from the country without significant payments to the government. But Nestle didn't stop there. They also repeated similar practices in America. For example, in the US state Maine, they pumped the water out of the ground for free, bottled it, and sold it back to the consumer at 2,000 times the price of their tap water at home. So they literally just took the tap water of the people and sold it back to them at a higher price, advertised as if it was from a special water source. Nestle had pumped so much water that a small 3,000 resident community had no water for almost 2 days, while Nestle didn't stop and continued to pump water out of the ground. And also in California, while the state was suffering a drought, they pumped about 30 million gallons of water out of the ground. This only cost them a ridiculous amount of $524 per year, even though their permit for pumping water had already expired in 1988. Nestle was extracting more than double of what was considered sustainable. But they didn't stop until legal actions were taken against them and Nestle was ordered to stop the unauthorized diverting of water. These three were the main controversies of Nestle, but there is still a question that remains. Has Nestle stopped with practices like this? Have they finally gotten better? No, actually not really. In 2024, an investigation revealed that baby food products that were sold in low and middle income countries contained high levels of added sugar. For instance, a serving of Cerelac cereal for 6-month-old babies sold in Thailand contained 6 grams of added sugar, whereas the same product in Europe has none. And the added sugar is actually problematic in baby food. The World Health Organization has warned that early exposure to added sugars can lead to a lifelong preference for sweet foods, increasing the risk of obesity and other diseases. Despite this, Nestle's products in countries like the Philippines and South Africa often contain significant amounts of added sugar. Despite all of these controversies, Nestle still remains as one of the leading companies in the food industry, even though many people have tried to boycott it. But the company sells so many products and owns so many different brands that without knowing it, a lot of people buy from Nestle brands, which makes it really hard to boycott. This probably is the reason that the company still continues to grow. Thanks for watching. If you liked my video and want to support my work, like the video, subscribe to the channel and write your opinion on Nestle in the comments. And you may also want to watch the next video that now shows up on your screen. See you there.